Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we're going to be talking about certain things such as bloating, joint pain, brain fog, constipation, diarrhea, eczema. Boy, those all sound ugly, and they certainly don't feel very comfortable when they have them. A lot of people might find outside ways of how they found themselves feeling such discomfort. But there's one of those interesting ways that we can perhaps look at the diet and see if this is perhaps the culprit of what's causing all of these unlikely things to make us feel so uncomfortable. Leaky gut is not only caused by food, but stress and environmental play a role as well. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is physical therapist, functional nutrition therapist, and professional yoga therapist. In fact, boy, there's therapy in all three areas that she's going to be talking with us with more than 17 years of experience working with healthcare. The experience led our guest to study nutrition because, she wasn't seeing changes in health with just exercise intervention and PT and yoga as well. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Sharon Anoff. Sharon, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Boy, this just seems to be something that almost feels overwhelming for somebody who might be suffering some of these conditions. How did you come to discover the way to be able to help people with something like this?
Well, like you said, I've been a PT for a long time, and I've worked with people in a lot of various settings, from the acute care hospital to rehab to home care, and I just wasn't seeing the results that people aren't just getting well. So that led me to study nutrition. People, as we get older, we see a lot of chronic issues, and it just didn't seem right to me. Aging doesn't have to be that way. What we think of as normal aging, it really doesn't have to be that way if we pay attention to our diet and lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Now, leaky gut, we're starting to see more and more about how, of course, what we eat and I guess how we process food to be kind of the problem that people are suffering from, but it seems to be one of those things that, is kind of one of the last things people look at.
Yeah, a lot of people just don't make that connection between what they eat and how they feel, and everything is connected.
Karen, are you still there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. It seemed to me there was a little bit more to the answer than that.
Yeah, and over 2,000 years ago, Hippocrates said that all disease begins in the gut, and a lot of people may have heard this before, but modern science is actually now proving that this is true. And over 70% of our immune system actually resides in the gut in the form of lymphoid tissue. So the role of the lymphoid tissue is to protect us from foreign invaders. And when you have issues in the gut, it can affect the entire body. It might not even present as digestive issues, but a lot of physicians overlook this as a cause of chronic disease.
Now, you approach this through what is known as functional nutrition. Let's talk a little more in detail about what that means.
Yeah, so functional nutrition is based on the work of Dr. Jeffrey Bland and the Institute for Functional Medicine, which he founded with his wife in 1991. And it looks at the underlying causes and triggers of an illness. And one of the keys is listening to the client's story. We find that when we ask the right questions, we can get a deeper insight into what's going on in there. So functional nutrition embraces a person-centered approach as opposed to a disease-centered approach. So that means we're looking at the whole person and the bio-individuality of a person, and we're not just looking at the disease and treating the disease the same way in every person, because we're all different. So we engage the client as a therapeutic partner. We're not doing something to them, we're doing something with them to help them take control of their health. So it recognizes that a one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't work. And again, it takes a whole body-mind approach to diet, lifestyle, not just addressing what we eat, but how we eat it, the environment we eat it in, the environments we live and work in, how we sleep, and how we manage stress and our exercise.
So tell us what leaky gut is. What are the symptoms? How does somebody know they have something like that?
Yeah, so just a little explanation. When we talk about leaky gut, it's also known as increased intestinal permeability. We're talking about the small intestine. So the small intestine is a tube that connects our stomach to the colon. It's about 15 to 20 feet long when stretched out, and if it was spread out flat, it would actually cover the size of a tennis court. So the role of the small intestine is to receive our partially digested food from the stomach and to digest and absorb it. So the inside of the small intestine is lined with a single layer of cells. And on the inside of these cells, we have finger-like projections that are called villi and microvilli. And their job is to absorb the nutrients from the food. So you can kind of think of these villi like a shag carpet. And each of the shags of the carpet is waving around, doing its job, absorbing different vitamins and minerals. And then the outside of the small intestine, you might want to think of kind of like a cheesecloth. The cells are really close together, and they form something called tight junctions between each cell. So it acts as a barrier system, and when it's functioning normally, it allows for only the smallest particles to get out, which are the nutrients that our body needs. So you can imagine these cells fitting really close together and only allowing the good things out. It keeps the larger particles that might be undigested proteins, bacteria, or even foreign substances from getting out and into our bloodstream where they're not supposed to be. So when we have what's called leaky gut, these tight junctions between the cells loosen up. And when they loosen up, it increases the space between them. So if you think about that cheesecloth, well, now there's some holes ripped in it. And when you have these larger holes or spaces, those larger particles, undigested foods, bacteria, toxins that are supposed to move on to our colon and get passed out to the body will enter the bloodstream. And when this happens, it just can wreak all kinds of havoc on the body.
Well, it certainly doesn't sound or feel very pleasant, does it?
Yeah. So as far as some of the symptoms, they're, of course, going to vary from person to person because we're all different. And they might present as outright digestive issues, something like gas or bloating, irritable bowel syndrome, constipation, diarrhea. But, you know, it might not present as a digestive issue at all. It could present in other body parts. So oftentimes you'll see skin issues like rashes, hives, eczema. If somebody has multiple food sensitivities, that's a sure sign of leaky gut. It can present as chronic fatigue, chronic pain, brain fog, especially after eating. There might be chronic headaches, poor immunity, and even autoimmune diseases. And now they're even linking mental health issues like anxiety, depression, or ADHD to leaky gut.
Well, it seems to me those are some interesting symptoms for something like this.
Yeah, and like I said, you know, a lot of people don't connect the gut to how they feel, and that something happening in my skin could actually be caused by my gut and what I'm eating.
Mm-hmm. Now, what is it that causes this? Is it just the food we eat? Is it stress? Or what are some of the factors that you see come into play here?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. You know, the short answer is inflammation, but the inflammation comes primarily from our diet and lifestyle. So the standard American diet that most people eat is a lot of processed foods. It's lacking in nutrients and fiber. And these highly processed foods cause inflammation in our body. Eating excess sugar or over-consuming alcohol increases the inflammation. GMO foods or toxins from non-organic produce or conventionally raised meat and dairy. And also the what we cook our food in, the hydrogenated and trans fats, our body can't recognize those, so that causes inflammation. And then you also have some foods that we might think of as healthy for us, like milk, eggs, and soy, which can be inflammatory in certain people. So we always want to look at people individually and look at their individual food sensitivities to make sure that something we think is good for us isn't actually causing some of these problems. I mentioned environmental toxins, so of course the pesticides and things we might come in contact with on a daily basis, like household cleaners, laundry detergent, or personal care products, if they're not organic, could be causing some of these issues. And other things we might not think about, like use of antibiotics or over-the-counter pain relievers, can damage those villi in our gut and also damage the healthy bacteria in our gut. So when that happens, it leads to something called dysbiosis. And that's just an imbalance of the good bacteria and the bad bacteria in the gut. And again, that will lead to inflammation. You mentioned stress also. When our body is in a state of chronic stress, the immune system is weakened, and then we're less able to fight off the foreign invaders like viruses and bacteria. And sleep is really important. A lot of people might not think about that, but as a culture, we're chronically sleep deprived. And when we sleep, that's our body's natural repair system. They kick in and help our body to repair any damage that might be done.
Mm-hmm. It just seems like there's just so much to this. I kind of wonder, especially this day and age, you know, with everybody all of a sudden seemingly having this gluten intolerance, what that's all about, and if it leads to something like this.
Yeah, so you hear a lot about gluten intolerance these days. So gluten is a protein found in wheat and several other grains like barley and rye, and it's what makes breads and pastries elastic and gluey. But the problem with gluten is that it's a large molecule, and it's really hard to digest. So just the digestive process, trying to digest this large molecule, can cause inflammation. And it's kind of a vicious cycle because the inflammation leads to leaky gut, the leaky gut leads to inflammation. So when you have the leaky gut, remember we talked about those tight junctions loosening up, making bigger holes in that cheesecloth. So then you have this large particle of gluten that's not properly digested that gets out of the small intestine into the bloodstream. That creates an immune response because the body doesn't recognize it, and that creates more inflammation.
Now, it's interesting to take this approach. How long is it before people begin to see changes when you use functional nutrition as an approach to turning this around? Does it turn around? Does it heal? Does it change?
Yeah, that's a good question. And again, it's going to be different for everybody, and a lot of it may depend on how long the person's had the condition. You know, if somebody has had problems all their lives, it's probably going to take a little longer than something that just started recently. But the good news is that the gut lining does repair itself, and it actually replaces the cells every 5 to 7 days. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we'll see changes that quickly, because the big key is we have to get that inflammation under control. And as we talked about, there's a lot that can cause inflammation in the body. But a good way to think about it is the 5 R's. We want to remove, replace, repair, re-inoculate, and rebalance the body. So first and foremost, we want to remove the offending substances that lead to inflammation. So as we talked about, these are things like processed foods, trans fats, anything the individual person might be sensitive to, excess sugar, alcohol, and again, the conventionally raised meat and dairy and GMOs. Then we also want to look at the toxins in the environment that we talked about. and then replace those with some better choices. So we can do this by eating a whole food diet, eating organic fruits and veggies when possible, and organically raised meats and dairies. And I know it's not easy for everybody to eat organic all the time. So there's something called the Dirty Dozen list that the Environmental Working Group puts out every year. And what that list is it lists the top 12 fruits and vegetables that are the most highly sprayed. So for those vegetables and fruits, for sure you want to eat organic, and that includes things like berries, spinach, peppers, apples, peaches, grapes, and I actually have a list of that on my website if people want to take a look at that. And then there's also something they put out called the Clean 15. So these are the fruits and vegetables that aren't as sprayed and are better for you if you can't eat them organically. Although I just have to put a side note in there because on that list they do have corn and papaya and zucchini as the Clean 15, but these days these items are GMO. So if you know something's a GMO food, you should avoid that as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, what are some go-to ways? Is it mostly fruits and vegetables that you suggest for people to reverse this, or?
A whole food diet, there's certain foods that are soothing to the small intestine, like bone broths. I don't know if people have heard of bone broths, but that's becoming really popular these days. Things like aloe juice are healing to the gut. And, I always like to start with diet because this is going to begin the repair process, but depending on your condition and how long you've had it, you may need to add some specific supplements in. And this is where I'd recommend somebody work with a functional nutrition practitioner to find out what supplements are right for you and what you need for your repair process.
Now, how can people find out more about you? Is there a website they can go visit?
There is a website, but before we get there, I just want to talk about the last two R's, which are re-inoculate.
Sure.
So we talked about the dysbiosis, or the imbalance of bacteria in the gut, and how that leads to inflammation. So we want to repopulate our guts with probiotics. And these probiotics are the good bacteria that our body needs to fight disease and fight inflammation. And you can and should get these both in food form and supplement form. So fermented foods like sauerkraut or kimchi, kombucha, have naturally occurring probiotics in them. And I've heard it recommended to have maybe 2 forkfuls of a fermented food with a meal to help repopulate the gut. And then I'm a big fan of a good quality probiotic. Most people can tolerate it. There may be certain conditions where it's not tolerated, like if somebody has a small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. But for the most part, a probiotic is going to be good for people. And usually if it's refrigerated, it's going to be a better quality. And just one thing I want to throw out there about supplements in general. When you walk into the health food store, the grocery store, and the supplement aisle, it's overwhelming. I mean, gosh, there's so many supplements there and so many different brands, and, how do I choose the one? But one thing you want to make sure if you are taking any supplements is that there's no fillers in them. So make sure you read the ingredients and make sure there's nothing in there like corn or wheat or soy, because, think about it, you're trying to get this bad stuff out of your diet, and then you're taking a supplement to help repair, and you may not know it has these products in it that are going to kind of counteract what you're trying to fix. So, and again, working with a nutrition practitioner can help you navigate that whole supplement area because it can be really confusing.
Now, you mentioned supplementation, obviously, and maybe taking probiotics if you're not getting it from some of the foods that you just suggested. How do you know what a good quality one is? Where do you get those? Because I know that going to your typical supermarket just isn't going to really give you what you're looking for, is it?
Yeah, well, again, with the probiotic, usually if it's refrigerated, that means it's a better quality. There's a lot of different strains out there, and, you know, I don't think it's necessary to get into specific strains unless you have issues that are going on that aren't being resolved, and then you really will need someone to work with you because it can be really confusing. So, you know, just a high-quality probiotic that's in the refrigerator section and doesn't have any fillers should be a good place to start. Sometimes when people start taking probiotics, they actually may experience some digestive issues like bloating or gas. And the thing, if that happens, I would recommend backing off and taking less than a full dose and then slowly working your way up, or maybe trying a different kind. And again, a nutrition practitioner can help you with this.
It's all pretty exciting knowing that you can reverse symptoms about something that goes on in your gut, huh?
Yeah, you know, and if you think about it, what you eat is kind of who you are. We just don't make that connection.
It's funny how real cliches can tend to be, isn't it?
Yeah, you are what you eat, or you are what you're able to absorb and digest is actually more accurate.
Mm-hmm. And is there a website people can find out more? Ways to contact you?
There is. My website is Enlightened You Wellness, and my email is enlightenedyouwellness@gmail.com. I have an office in Northeast Portland where I can see patients or clients in person, but I also can do Skype or phone consults. So if people are local in the area but want some nutritional advice, we can do that.
Now, Sharon, what do you find to bring you the most joy in this particular work? It would seem that people realizing that how could it be so simple that I overlooked what's causing all these problems here?
Yeah, well, you know, my mission is just prevention, healthy aging, because, again, I've been working in healthcare for 17 years, and I get to see the unhealthy side. I get to see people with chronic diseases who, you know, to me it's just really sad because life doesn't have to be that way. I mean, yes, we are going to get older and things will pop up, but there's a lot of things we can do in our personal lives to help manage it so it doesn't get out of control. So, you know, I just really like to teach people about how they can be their healthiest and maintain that throughout their lifespan.
And it seems pretty simple, too, doesn't it?
It seems simple, yet it can be very confusing. And it's also not easy, you know, because when we talk about rebalancing the lifestyle, managing stress is key because chronic stress creates inflammation. And the other piece is getting proper movement and exercise. Exercise is one of the best stress relievers out there. So, you know, my advice for that is to find something you enjoy doing because then it's fun and it's not work, you know. So simple things like just parking your car farther away when you're going into a store and walking a little extra, getting outside in nature, or even just taking time for yourself to just sit for 3 minutes and relax and breathe will really help bring that stress level down.
Boy, it certainly makes a lot of sense with that. For our listeners out there, again, go ahead and give your website out. EnlightenedYouWellness.com. I like that website, EnlightenedYouWellness.com.
Well, yeah. Well, you know, I want people to feel like they're already there. They're already enlightened. They're already there. And that's my goal, is just to, you know, give people the best quality of life they can and have them realize that they have control over that.
Well, isn't that always true, too, how we've taken this time in our days and in our lives where we seem to surrender our personal power to experts who know better than we do, and before you know it, they're led into a direction that doesn't seemingly make them as happy as they thought it would, but certainly when it comes to taking care of your nutritional needs and paying attention, as we've been talking about today, your gut, and if you're feeling those kinds of things that kind of get you down, you know, this is one of the simplest ways that you can reverse that, and I would think it would be a lot better path than perhaps popping a pill.
Right. And, you know, I feel like we know our bodies best. We've been living in them all our lives, and the thing with functional nutrition, functional medicine, is we really take the time and listen to the client, and let them tell their story and go back to when did this start and try to put all the pieces together to get to the root cause of that illness so that they can manage it and not have to pop pills all the time just to feel better.
Mm-hmm. Well, Sharon, thank you for being on the Beyond 50 radio program today and letting our listeners know what it is they can do, and if they get a little bit confused on that path, to contact you directly by going to enlightenedyouwellness.com, correct?
Yes.
Very good. Sharon, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thanks for having me.
We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. There you go. The responsibility is in your hands, but sometimes you might need a little bit of guidance to point you and lead you into the right direction, and that's where enlightenedyouwellness.com comes in. You can contact Sharon directly, and as she said, you can certainly work with her by telephone or by Skype if you don't happen to be in the Portland, Oregon area. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. You've been listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. You can discover more by visiting us at beyond50radio.com. Also follow us on Twitter at Beyond50Radio. And, well, heck, why not? Like us on Facebook. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in, and remember, live your day past halfway.